Good morning, students. Welcome back to another class of English literature. Today we will be dealing with the next genre of English literature, that is poetry. Before we begin with a poem, let's know what is poetry. The role poetry plays in our communities is that of empowerment, not only by giving voice to the individual or the collective, but by giving creative freedom to those who seek it. Today we will begin with a poem titled Television by Roald Dahl. About the author, Roald Dahl, September 13, 1916 to November 23, 1990, was a British author who penned 19 children's books over his decades-long writing career. In 1953, he published the best-selling story collection Someone Like You and married actress Patricia Neal. He published the popular book James and Giant Peach in 1961. In 1964, he released another highly successful work, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which was later adapted for 2 films. But Dahl had to face some controversies as critics and parents have talked of their portrayal of children's harsh revenge on adult wrongholders. In his defense, Dahl claimed that children have a cruder sense of humor than adults and that he was merely trying to appeal to his readers. Moving on to the theme of the poem, there are 2 themes. The first one, death of imagination. Amidst all the people of his time, Dahl was perhaps singularly ahead of his time when he predicted that television would spell the death of imagination in children's minds. As a child author, he must have known more than others how children's faces light up when they read or listen to a story and how they often lose themselves in the details of a book as their imagination constructs entire worlds for them in their minds. However, television hands them ready images. As a result, their imagination suffers and they later become skeptical in thinking that what they cannot see is not real. Moving on to the next theme, reading as a habit to be inculcated. Even though Dahl was writing primarily for children, but the message of this particular poem is more intended for the parents than children. Because the poet believes that it is a parent's duty to inculcate the habit of reading in his or her child. Children, they might not know that it is better than reading is better than watching television for hours, but parents, they do. They allow their children to watch television for long hours because it helps them complete their household chores. However, by putting their own convenience aside, they should introduce the children to the wonderful world of books. The poetic device is used, rhyming scheme. The poet follows a simple rhyming scheme throughout the poem, A-A-B-B, which we will see when we do the poem in details. Rhetorical devices, the first one, apostrophe. This rhetorical device is used when a poet addresses to an absent audience. Dahl uses the device of apostrophe when he addresses his poem to the English parents and advises them on doing away with the television sets. Personification. This rhetorical device is used to give human qualities to do something that is incapable of human actions. Dahl uses this device of personification in 2 cases. First, when he gives television the human ability to kill something, and second, when he gives imagination the human ability to die at its hands. The central idea, the poet wishes to warn readers about how television can have the effect of making dull children's minds. Watching television can make children unimaginative and prevent them from enjoying the fairy tales they are supposed to like. On the other hand, reading is a good habit for children. It sharpens their minds and introduces them to the whole new worlds they never knew existed. Therefore, Dahl requests parents to bring back the books they had read before the invention of television back into their homes. About the poem, this is a famous poem where the poet advises and inspires the children to read books instead of watching television. This is one of the most relevant poems of our time. The poem takes a comic look at a serious problem existing among young children today. It warns the children about the dangers of watching television excessively, which robs our creativity and imagination power. He advises the children to read books as it will enable us to discover deeper levels of joy, find fulfillment in life, and open a whole new and exciting world for us. Moving on to the explanation part. The most important thing we have learned so far as children are concerned is never, never, never let them near your television set. Or better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all. Let us come to the explanation part, understanding part. Here, the poet, from his past experiences, advises that people should not allow their children to sit near the television set. Rather, he advises parents not to install the idiotic thing called television. But why does he refer the television as an idiotic thing? The poet has attempted to answer this question in the entire poem. Next part. In almost every house we've been, we have watched them gaping at the screen. They loll and slop and lounge about and stare until their eyes pop out. Last week in someone's place we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. Now here again the poet shares his experience. He says that almost every house that he has visited, he has seen children watching or gaping at the screen, looking constantly at the television screen. They were staring with their eyes wide open and their full concentration was on the screen. They were tired of sitting for a long time. Therefore, they loll and slop and lounge about. Means they were all tired and they were sitting or lying around in a very lazy and casual manner. But still, they could not stop watching television, although their eyes were red, which showed that they were tired of watching television. Here, a dozen eyeballs means half a dozen children were seen sitting on the floor at someone's house visited by the poet recently. They sit and stare and stare and sit until they are hypnotized by it, until they are absolutely drunk with all that shocking, ghastly junk. Moving on to the understanding part. Again, when a child is seated in front of a television set, they can sit and stare continuously for long hours. They don't move around. Probably they forget that there is a real world around them. Rather, for them, what they are watching on the screen becomes real for that time, for that particular time. They are hypnotized by this idiotic box. Their minds are filled with the unreal, inappropriate things that they are watching according to their age. The television shows kills the valuable time of children. They do not seem to be going out to play, to perform physical exercise. They have no scope of spending time with books and nature. They do not interact with others. Their minds are filled with the images of a virtual world. Here, a drunk man's, see, it's mentioned clearly over here. Their minds filled with the images and stories of a virtual world are compared to a drunk man's imaginary world. And this is a metaphor used over here. Next, oh yes, we know it keeps them still. They don't climb out the windowsill. They never fight or kick or punch. They leave you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. So you can see the rhyming scheme followed in the lines. Still, sill, A, punch, lunch, B. Okay. Now we move on to the understanding part. The poet, he says that he has from his past experiences. He has witnessed that the television helps keeping a naughty child calm. When they sit in front of a television set, they no more think of doing mischievous things like climbing out the windowsill, fighting. Siblings, they are found to be very calm and quiet, sitting and watching the TV shows. Therefore, the mothers, they are free to cook the lunch, they are free to wash the dishes without any disturbance. That is, they are free to do all the household chores without disturbance. But parents, the adults, they cannot give this excuse and allow the children sit in front of a television set for hours, because according to the poet, it is causing more harm than doing any good. But did you ever stop to think, to wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved thought? It rots the sense in the head. It kills imagination dead. Now here the poet asks a question to the parents, and he himself gives a brilliant answer. He asks the parents, did they ever think what harm is this television set causing to their loving child? And he gives an answer to the question. He says, watching the television regularly causes damage to the sense in the head. Children, they are drawn away from reality, from the real world around him. He believes what he watches without considering the context. It also kills the imaginative power of a child. They start living in a preset imaginary world that they see on the screen. They gradually lose their own creative power, creative thinking, their own imagination. Though what TV shows display are mostly fictional, that is a close imitation of the real world, not a completely different world as in a fairy tale. It clogs and clutters up the mind. It makes a child so dull and blind. Again, Roald Dahl over here continues with his argument on how television affects a child's mind. Children, they watch different programs on different channels. Sometimes there are contradictory ideas. Sometimes it does not match with reality. So all these messes up with the organized ideas and thoughts in a child's mind, and it clogs and clutters up the mind of a child. Moreover, the child forgets to think on his own. His mind is full of images which he has seen on the television set. His invaluable time is wasted. His study, his thought on how to improvise his skills and personality is neglected. Therefore, the child gradually becomes dull and blind. I hope this part of the poem is clear. Go through this part, read it again and again, and in my next video, I will explain the later part of the poem. Thank you, children. Have a wonderful day ahead.